hoping by the end of today, you are gonna have we're dipping our toes in the water because I know there's a lot of information out there on the interwebs, on the Google Lawyer, all those things, that gets people confused. And that people, I've noticed, because I talk to a lot of people, I do a lot of speaking events, they use a lot of these words interchangeably, like a will and a trust, for example, not really understanding the difference between the two. So I'm hoping at least by the end of today, you're going to be one step closer in understanding what all these things mean, and then also giving you the tools in the next steps as to what you need to make sure that your family, your loved ones, or whatever your goals are going to be taken care of when you're no longer here to take care of those things. So, I've been an attorney for the last 14 years, and I've appeared all over Southern California, so except for Orange County, which I have a hearing coming up there, so now I'm going to cover all the areas. But all the way up to LA, Victorville, Indio, and then far south down to Chula Vista, down by the Mexican border. And my experience has primarily been with family law, so that's with divorces and custody and domestic violence and all of those messy things that we've heard about. So I have been dealing with families, very high conflict families. So how does that all translate to estate planning? Is that I'm taking my experience of that high conflict, seeing families fighting and relationships ruined. How can we prevent that, and what we can do with our actions today to prevent that from happening and having one of our family members fighting with one another? Because in the probate court and family law court, there's not much differences because all the laundry is aired out even in that courthouse as well. So that's what I'm aiming to do. What I've also noticed throughout my years of practice is that I review a lot of existing estate plans, and I'm always floored as to what attorneys do and the disservice that they do for their clients, whether that's planning for minor kids. So I have 3 minor kids, and we'll talk about that too, that there's just not enough, in my opinion, that we can do for our minor kids, is also making sure that our assets are where they need to be and having a plan in place for that, and making sure we leave a treasure map for our family members as well, so that they know where to go in the event of our incapacity, and then eventually when we pass away as well. So it's that, and then making sure we also leave our non-liquid assets, and I'll talk about what that is if that's important to you as well. So if you're a business owner, if you have your headshots, they're really expensive, so anytime I can put my headshot in anything, I'm going to do it. And I like this picture, so that's my headshot. But this is my family, and this is my why about estate planning. So that's my husband Keith over there. We have these 3 little tyrants. He's the biggest tyrant out of them all. This is my 6-year-old son Declan. He's 4. This is Dylan, and this is Killian, who is the ruler of all 3 of them. But the reason why I have them up here, not because I think they're adorable, but they truly ground me in reminding why I have a plan in place. And I know that my plan is going to take care of them the way that I want them to be taken care of. Whether it's making sure the people that we would leave them to in the event that something happens to my husband and I, but also the assets and the plan that we have in place too is going to take care of them as well. Because at the end of the day, estate planning is for us, like while we're living, it gives us peace of mind. It brings that last piece of the puzzle in terms of our financial plan. But also, then it's for our loved ones or whomever or whatever, if that's a charity or an organization that you want to take care of once you pass away as well. They're going to know whether or not you live up to their promises. I took care of it. I promised to take care of it, because I hear that a lot. Mom and dad said they took care of it. Why is it like this? Or why do we have to go to court? Well, so our probate court here in Southern California, it has 4 different functions. Yeah. So one, it's the administration of assets when somebody dies with a will or without a will. So that's one function. Second function are conservatorships. So that's for adults who cannot make their own financial or medical decisions on their own any longer. So you get the most common examples would be somebody who has dementia. They can't make their own medical or financial decisions, so we've got to appoint someone to do that if they don't have financial powers of attorney or a healthcare directive. The third thing that they do are guardianships. So that's if minor children's biological parents can't take care of them, that is a function of the probate court as well. And then there's trust litigation, and then there's litigation involving all 4 of those like subdivisions that they have. So probate court is just like civil court, it's like traffic court, family court, criminal court. It's just a subdivision of our court. But in Riverside County, there's only 4 probate judges. San Diego County, there's only 4 probate judges as well. And so that might not sound like a lot, but what the statistics showed from COVID is that over 68% of Americans don't have an estate plan. That's a lot. So then if we take that same statistic and we apply it to the residences of Riverside County, I was actually driving here, and I shouldn't have been doing this, but don't tell my husband was a police officer. I asked Siri while I was driving, how many people live in the county of Riverside?
I found this on the web.
It is 2.4 million people. So if we take that, 68% of the population is gonna go through the probate department with 4 judges. And again, that's not the only thing that they're doing. They're doing conservatorships and they're doing guardianships as well. So that is one of the factors as to why it takes so long to go through probate court.
Wow.
So what probate court does in its most simplest basic function, when we're just talking about the administration of an estate, is that it's taking assets that belong, I don't know why, but this is always the example I give, great Aunt Sally. I don't have a great Aunt Sally. I don't know a great Aunt Sally, but that's just who I always utilize in my examples. Is that great Aunt Sally dies with a house, is that the only person that can then transfer her house if she doesn't have a trust, and if she doesn't have a trust, for example, is a judge. So the judge, he or she will be able to transfer that asset to either her intended beneficiary that she identified in a will. If she didn't have a will, it's the state's laws that are going to dictate who that property would go to. So a judge is the only one that can do that. So that is what our probate court does. We're going to talk more in depth about that. What I always say is that in all of my presentations that I give, and you can apply this to not just probate court, but any court that you lay out in public, you're hearing about it, whether it's family court or criminal court or whatever, you can say to yourself CCD. And what that stands for is cost, conflict, and delay. It's across the board in any department that you go into, whether it's family, like I said, civil, traffic, or probate court. We're going to talk about the cost of probate, an estate going through probate. We're going to talk about the conflict. Conflict doesn't necessarily mean people like adversaries. You have like a defendant and a plaintiff, and they have these varying positions. It could be an internal conflict of, why are we having to go to court? What is expected of me? What are these forms I have to fill out? What is the judge going to say to me? It's really stressful. What do I do? It's that internal conflict as well. And then if there is family conflict, obviously that is very tangible. And then the delay. How long does it take for a case to go through probate court here in Southern California? Or just delay in general. Like, I have a lot of clients who are in law enforcement, because my husband is as well. And like my husband, when he has to get suited up to go appear in criminal court, he gets down there and then it gets continued before this proceeding even starts for another 3 months. And the same thing with family law cases. You get geared up to go to trial, you get there, it gets continued for 6 months. So cases get continued and delayed all of the time. So it doesn't matter what kind of case you're talking about, you can always say this acronym here. So the very first thing to talk about is, what is estate planning? Or what is an estate plan, I should say. An estate plan are documents that are going to support you and your loved ones in the event of incapacity, and then if you become incapacitated, and then when you die as well. So all of those documents are, whether it's a will or a trust, sometimes if you have a trust, if you have a trust, you also have a will, your healthcare directive, your durable powers of attorney. These documents here avoid conservatorship, guardianship nominations if you have minor children, and then with the trust and even with wills, there's a bunch of other supporting documents as well. It's your funeral plans, for example. What are your desires? They are a plan for distribution of personal property, like your things, your things, your pictures, your artwork that's on the wall, your furniture, those kinds of things. And then it's also these outward declarations as well, to make sure that your goals, if it's to avoid probate, are also taken care of in those documents. But the purpose too behind, especially with the incapacity plan, which we're going to talk about, is to alleviate the burden from your family and determining you're making the decisions on their behalf now, so they don't have to guess what those would have been and then be burdened with the guilt. Did we do the right thing for mom or dad or my brother or my sister or whomever it may be? But most importantly, I don't just focus on the documents, because that's one piece of the puzzle. It's also understanding your family dynamics and what your goals are, and these documents are there to support you and provide you with financial clarity and legal clarity too on whatever your goals may be. If it's generating wealth, if it's taking care of your minors, if it's providing for grandkids, if it's buying more real estate, whatever it is, it's just one piece of that puzzle to support you and your goals. So here are some common misunderstandings. We're going to go with the ugly in a little bit, but these are just general common misunderstandings that I hear a lot. Is if we talk about what happens when we die, or we become incapacitated, somehow we're going to manifest that to happening sooner. I have not seen a study that actually says that. In fact, a financial planner told me she found a study that by having a plan in place, it can elongate your life, because now you've got a plan, you've got that peace of mind, less stress. So I'm going to go with that one, because I like that better, but I have never seen that actually occur.
It really is.
It takes too long. I don't have the time to sit down. I don't have time to comb my hair, let alone sit down and come up with an estate plan. I certainly understand that, but I hope that you'll understand why it's so important. I'm not old enough. I was in a group with a bunch of moms, and someone said this to me, is that genetically or historically in my family, nobody's died before the age of 93, so I have plenty of time. I'm like, okay, well, that is certainly true.
Wow.
But what I'm like, good for you, good for your family genes, but things happen. But my whole goal is through education, is that estate planning and trying to change the conversation that estate planning isn't just something we do when we retire, but the sooner that we have something in place, that is going to change with you as your life changes as well. So the sooner we can have something in place, the better, because we just don't know what's going to happen in our lives. I'm not wealthy enough. This is also another common misconception. I don't have a bunch of property. I only have my house. I have a couple of accounts. I know that trust funds and trust fund babies, you need to have millions and millions of dollars. Well, that is definitely not true, because I think where that comes from is just what we hear about in the media and in TV. We think of trust fund babies, and we think of like the Rockefeller family or like the Kardashian family. There is no cap, there's no floor when it comes to having an estate plan. In my opinion, everybody over the age of 18 should have at least some of these documents, if not all of them, because the probate court does not skip out on anybody just because you don't have enough assets or whatever the case may be. I have a will so my family can be taken care of, so I don't have to worry about it. Some situations that may be true, but most times, like I said, people they confuse what a will and trust does. But I will share with you that a will is a one-way ticket to probate court. So the good. What are the benefits to having an estate plan? And we're going to go through that as well here. Why have an estate plan? What is the purpose of having an estate plan? One, it's to ensure that your assets will go to the people that you want them to go to. Or charities, or nonprofits, or whatever it may be, whatever your goal is to where your assets are, it's to ensure that they actually get there. Because one of the things that most people don't understand is if you pass away without a plan, don't worry. State of California's got you covered with their own plan. You might not like that plan, but that's not your choice anymore. So it's making sure that your assets that you've worked so hard throughout your life are going to go to the places that you want them to go and take care of the things that are important to you. Avoiding the cost, conflict, and delay involved with the probate court. So I have here, this is the probate court, and this is how this generally works. So when someone passes away, the very first thing that we need to do is to actually open the estate. You file paperwork with the estate. There is a waiting period, because then you've got to put a notice in the physical newspaper. We're like the legal industry is like 25 years behind the rest of the world. physical hard newspaper. We have to put an ad in the legal classified. From there, you gotta wait, because you gotta make sure you're giving everyone the proper notice, and then you get your court order to actually start acting out on behalf of the estate. That may be 3 or 4 months before you get that court order to allow you to access bank accounts. So let's say, back to my great aunt Sally, she has this house. Even if it's paid for, there's certain things that still have to be taken care of, such as property taxes, utilities. Even if she had a bank account in her name that had $1 billion in it, hard cash, I'm not on it, she doesn't have a trust, I've gotta wait 3 or 4 months. Guess what's gonna happen to that property? I've got my own mortgage, I've got my own kids to take care of. Sorry, great aunt Sally, I'm not paying that. I can't afford it. And that happens to a lot of people. They don't realize that these accounts are frozen while they're waiting for that court order. Homes are lost, nearly lost, or lost to foreclosure in this process. Because the reality is that once someone passes away, it's not instantaneously that you're filing for the petition. Because one thing you do, you have to wait for the death certificate. If you've ever had to get a death certificate, it is not issued right away. It takes weeks to get it. So, and then you've got the grief and like trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. It may be 6 months down the line before you're actually to court. So that mortgage or the property taxes or whatever may be 6 months behind or longer. So that is a huge issue there. And then we get through to figuring out what great aunt Sally had. Hopefully she left a treasure map, which we'll talk about. Do you have to sell real estate and call Dan and Melissa here to help you out? And then finally you have to ask the court, can we please distribute the assets now? And the judge will review it, set it for a hearing, and then he or she will approve of that distribution schedule. And guess who gets paid first? The court. Yeah, attorneys are paid first. The executor is paid first too. Executors and attorneys are paid exactly the same. There's also a court appointed official on here. They're called probate referees. They're also paid out. Then the next are creditors are paid, and then it's beneficiaries are paid. So the whole process here in Southern California is 1 to 2 years, and that's a
question.
Yeah.
That estimated time, 1 to 2 years, is that with like one home?
Yeah.
That you're estimating?
Yeah. This is not a that was literally
Yeah.
the next words out of my mouth. A non-complicated estate, like with a house and some accounts, is still going to take that 1 to 2 years. Because remember, there's only 4 judges. They have these huge caseloads.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of court hearings, so you have to wait to get on their calendar to appear at these things. So it does take a while, and sometimes it goes longer than that. I was
3.5 years?
Yeah, I was talking to a family, their daughter's best friend's father passed away, 6 years. They've been going into court 6 years over his probate. You really want to look at something that's crazy is Michael Jackson's estate. All of that's public record, by the way. Nothing is hidden in court. Nothing is sealed, meaning it's not confidential. Because if someone has a will, you deposit it, meaning you put it out on public display. Essentially, anyone could go read it. So you could read all of Michael Jackson's stuff. Because he didn't have a trust, he didn't have a will, neither did Prince, neither did Aretha Franklin had a will, but it's all public record. So it's not because I'm like special and I've got some agent in my pocket that can pull this stuff, it's all in public display. So I have Anna Nicole Smith's will, now she's making this resurgence through Netflix. I have Kennedy Onassis's will, because it's all like there. But anyway, so all for public consumption, then all the beneficiaries are also identified, and then you match that with the petition. Now everybody knows what that beneficiary may be receiving as well, and what their personal information is. So that 1 to 2 years, and the cost is approximately 5% of the value of the estate. 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but let me give you some hard numbers. So back in October, I believe, the home value in Riverside, the average home value was $600,000. I don't know what it is now.
It's 625.
Okay, so it's gone up a little bit. So if we were to take that same number, I'm gonna use 600 because the math is easier for me. 5%, that's $30,000. It's cost to get you through probate. That's $30,000 that your beneficiaries, whomever that may be, are not receiving.
Also, you have to include without a trust, you actually have to step up tax ramifications as well.
Right.
If you could explain that to everybody when you get a chance.
Yeah, I could do that too. So, so that is just the hard cost with the fees associated with all those individuals that are involved, and the publication fees is just with the courthouse. Taxes are completely different as well and taking care of that. And then that also depends with your step up and basis if there were 2 owners and what kind of plans that they had in place as well. But it is a mess, and this number is conservative. It can be higher than that as well. So having a plan in place is protecting and caring for your minor children. Does anybody here have minor children at home? Okay, so most estate plans, they have one little paragraph involving minor kids, and it's your guardianship nominations. I don't personally think that's enough because I've seen enough tragedies in my experience with family law, that's not enough for kids, and that changed why I'm doing what I'm doing is specifically because of minor kids. And that is having a kids protection plan. So what does that mean? It means that we go beyond just this little paragraph for our children. It's that we come up with an emergency plan, creating our own team of first responders, that we pick people, we have temporary guardians and long-term guardians, and that our temporary guardians can get to our kids within a few minutes. And they may be different from our long-term guardians, people who actually raise our children. So in my family, for example, my long-term guardians live out of state. It's my brother and my sister. If something were to happen to my husband and I, like if we go out on a date night, very few times if we can, we don't get home, what's gonna happen to my kids? My brother and my sister, it's gonna take them several hours before they get here. So what will happen? My babysitter calls the police show up, the police have very few options as to what happens. They're gonna be taken into protective custody until they can find my family members. And protective custody, CPS, and it could be temporary foster care. Down in San Diego, there is a house, a facility that like houses these kids, and they're all from all different backgrounds, whether it's picking them up off the street, they're vandalizing, they're involved in things they shouldn't be, trying to find temporary foster care, trying to find family members, are all in one spot. So I couldn't imagine my little kids there for 5 minutes, let alone anything longer than that. So planning and protecting for your minor children has to be more than just the long term, like who's gonna raise them. It's also who can get to your kids in the event of an incident. So these are just the emergency ID cards. I have one, this is my husband's actually. He has another one, so I didn't steal it from him, so he has one. Because I make them in 2 different sizes. This is a credit card size, and this is like, as my grandmother would say, a billfold size. I have a giant mom wallet, so this goes in there. But it has all the people, these are all our temporary guardians up here. The spouse is listed first, so if my husband were in an accident, our phones are useless now to third parties because they're all password protected.
Basic password.
Yeah, and so if you're in an accident and you're unresponsive, it doesn't matter that your phone may be operating, they can't access this, so they go through your things looking for identification. So they would find this because you would keep it in your wallet, and it says, I've got minor children at home. Please, these are the people that have authority and the documentation to have them, please call them. And on the back side is my phone number too, so it says if you can't get a hold of any of these people, call my attorney. And I am there to facilitate that phone call all of the time. So a kids protection plan, that's the temporary and long-term guardianships. I do medical powers of attorney for our minor kids too. So if anybody else needs to take them to the doctor, absent an emergency, they can do that. Instructions to your guardian so that they can follow in your footsteps and honor your wishes to how you want your kids to be raised. Healthcare information, just like who's a pediatrician, what's the policy number on all of that. I do confidential guardian exclusions because some families have those people that look great on paper, but we know how they operate behind closed doors, and those may not be people you want to raise your children. Your wallets for your cards, fridge, letters to babysitters, and all those kinds of things too. A plan takes into consideration family dynamics. So I was just talking to a sister this week, and her parents' plan did not take into consideration, and we're going to talk about this with the ugly, into family dynamics. Maybe your family is a blended family, and you've got your husband and you, it was a second marriage, and you both have kids from prior marriages. There's additional considerations you may want to have in your plan, such as like my family. This I will disclose as my family. I have 2 older half sisters, and my parents' plan that I did not draft. My parents' plan, they have a provision that my sisters get paid out first once my dad dies, so that there's no issues between my mom and my sisters waiting for their share of the estate. It sounds cold, but it's to save from fighting. Like, why should we have to wait till you die? Because it's my inheritance. Now I've got to wait till you die as well. It's just things like that to temper family drama, I guess. Things like that as well. What are the relationships like between your kids or your intended beneficiaries? So just as a preview, this particular plan that I was reviewing or counseling one of the beneficiaries, her parents named her and her 2 siblings co-trustees of her parents' trust. And I don't think the parents' attorney really had an honest conversation. What if they don't get along? What if they can't make a decision between the 3 of them? Then what happens? Like, spoiler alert, there was nothing like that in their plan. So if you can imagine where these 3 siblings are headed, they're all adults, there's multi-million dollars involved, lots of property, and they can't agree to anything. So they're more than likely gonna wind up in court. So a really good plan takes into consideration and understanding what your family background is. Establishing financial powers of attorney to avoid, and healthcare directives to avoid conservatorship. So remember, that's one of the functions of probate court is nominating these people, nominating a conservatorship if you need it. A lot of times I review estate plans and there's pieces of things, and these things aren't in there. So we want to avoid, if that's a goal of yours, is to avoid having to go to court, your family or your loved ones having to go to court so they can manage your things for you in the event of your incapacity, is making sure that these are taken care of. So this would be able, so if you were in the hospital and you're in a coma or you've had a stroke or something, you've got these people that can make your decisions as you state, right? Because you've already made those decisions. They just need to carry out your decisions, and then also be able to manage your finances on your behalf as well. Enriching your life to leave a legacy worth living behind. So once you've got all these pieces in place, now you can go out and fulfill whatever your goals are, and knowing that your plan is supporting you in doing so. And it's just, overall, it's peace of mind too, right? Like, I did it, and now you can mark it off your to-do list, because I know most people don't have it. So you could sit back like her too and be like, we finally did it, it's been on our list to do for all these years. Now I can sit back and relax and know that my family or my loved ones are going to be taken care of. But also know that what I do, which is differently, is that we review your plan every 3 years. So I was literally, on Monday, I was meeting with a couple who brought in their estate plan. It had dust on it. Like, they're literally dusting it off. And that has all kinds of problems, which we're going to talk about as well. So the idea is, it doesn't have to be a perfect plan. It's better than nothing, right? And peace of mind knowing we can come back and change it. So some real life examples of having that plan in place is, there was a family that was involved, the wife was involved in a car accident, and she was incapacitated. Fortunately for her and her husband had a living trust that was established that had their successor trustees nominated. They had temporary guardians already established as well, powers of attorney for their kids. So as she went off to the hospital, her husband went with her as well. They were able, through their own trust, have the successor trustee manage any of their finances for them while mom was in the hospital, while his wife was in the hospital. Grandma and grandpa, who were the temporary guardians, came, took care of the kids. They were able to take them to the doctors, all of their therapy appointments as well, because they had those healthcare authorizations as well. And then mom made a full recovery, and all those people just stepped back in their roles until they're needed again. And then once they do pass away, all of those people would be springing back into action to take care of the minor kids and taking care of the assets distributions as they laid out. So that's just like one real life positive example there. So let's talk about the bad. What are the consequences of not having an estate plan? So like I mentioned before, don't have a plan, don't worry, California's got you covered. It's through our intestacy laws. So the state of California has specified how your assets would be distributed if you do not have a will. And so, and it also depends upon the characterization of your property. So if you have separate property, it goes to certain people. If you have community property, it go to your spouse. So it may not be as you intended to. So for example, there is this husband and wife, they're a blended family. They do not have a plan, and what could happen, they're still living, what could happen is, full disclosure, this is my family. Not my parents, perhaps my in-laws, but they don't have a plan in place, they have a house. And my husband it's him and his brother, and then he has two, they're not minors, two in my mind, they still they're two younger brothers, so they're half brothers. Now, if something were to happen to their dad, he's older than his stepmom, the house would go to his stepmom because it's community property, 100% community property. Now, she would own that house outright, or it'd be hers, 100% hers. She passes away without a plan. Guess where that house goes to? To the half brothers. My husband and his brothers are out. So that is the bad. So that's the state's plan. Because there is no separate property, that separate property would have gone to my brother and his brother, my husband and his brother. But the community property would go to his stepmom 100%. And then if she dies without a plan, that's gonna go directly to his half brothers. And I'm certain that's not what his dad's plans are, but that's the reality of the state's plan. Also, I was talking to somebody earlier this week whose husband passed away suddenly and unexpectedly, and all of their property is in his name alone for a variety of reasons. And so it's the same thing too. It's like, well, technically it's his separate property. We're gonna have to go to court. We're gonna have to explain that the only reason why it was only in his name alone was for financing purposes, but they never got around to putting it as community property with her on title. That's still something she didn't want to have to do, is to go to court and deal with this. Yeah.
So in my mom's case, she was on the deed and everything, and the house would go to her, except the bank was saying that she needed to have her own, they wanted to like basically resell her the house to get onto the mortgage. And so, cause I guess she wasn't on the mortgage, she was just on the deed.
Right, on the title.
And so, yeah, on the title. And so basically they wanted her to pay back all the money that my dad took out on the house. And then, they wanted her to set up her own
Mortgage. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how, like,
That
that went. So
Yeah.
he didn't have a will, a trust, or any of that, so the bank ended up just taking it, cause there was too much money out on it.
Wow. That's not good.
So I don't know, like, how that even would work, like, yeah, okay, it would go to my mom, but then that other part of it is that it doesn't quite work like that, it just doesn't just go over. You still
No,
have
it
to sign
depends,
up.
yeah, so it depends too on the mortgage lender, cause some of them don't care and some of them do care, so
Yeah.
who's paying it and in their name, so it really just depends. Another consequence of not having a plan is the amount of time it's going in court. So as I mentioned before, conservatively, that 1 to 2 years, and lots of court fees and costs as well, because there's a lot that's involved with all of these cases. Like, even putting an ad in that newspaper is several $100s. Sometimes it's like, I've seen it at like $1,400, because it has to run once a week for 4 weeks. And then you have to get proof of publication. So all these things like add up for sure. Every time there's at least 2 hearings in every probate case. You got to pay a filing fee for those hearings, and you got to pay for the petition. You got to pay for everything. And that's where, as we talked about before, the whole process of probate court. Not having a plan is those family disputes and ruined relationships. So. As I mentioned with my own family, I don't know what the outcome is going to be or how that's all going to work out between the 4 brothers if that actually came to fruition. And I can imagine money makes people do a lot of crazy things, and people are okay with torpedoing their relationships with one another. It could be over $5. I mean, I've seen people get into crazy arguments over tchotchkes, that have no actual value, but has some sort of sentimental value associated with it. So it's avoiding, if that's important, it's avoiding these kinds of things as well. And then the reality is that what most people don't understand is that minor children cannot inherit. So what does that mean? That the court will not allow kids under the age of 18, they cannot pick up a check at under 18 years old. What happens is that the court sets up or requires you to set up what's called guardianship of the estate for minor kids. So The really bad example that, and also if there's no guardians nominated, you have two different guardianship cases. You have a guardianship of the estate and you have a guardianship over the person. Who's gonna have custody of these kids? And that may also cause fighting between family members. Like, I should have them because blah, blah, blah. And I should have them because, you know, she always liked me, or whatever the situation may be. You can imagine there's all kinds of things that people say. Lack of control over healthcare and financial decisions. So if you're incapacitated, not that you know, but you may not like the person or would have ever wanted that individual to be making your financial and healthcare decisions that you would have specified in those documents. So maybe it's your sister that applies for and gets a conservatorship, but you and your sister don't get along, and you know your sister makes bad decisions and she doesn't secretly like you, or whatever the situation, or maybe she's got a completely different viewpoint on healthcare, which is not, you know, maybe she has a holistic approach and maybe you don't, or whatever the situation is, and now she's gonna be the one making those decisions. So those are really, really important as well. So the real life example that I was going to give, with minor kids not being able to inherit. This is a very tragic story, so full disclosure. While I was still in family law, we got a call from this woman. Her and her husband were divorced, but they were still best friends. And he lived in Texas, she lived here in San Diego. She lived in San Diego. They had 5 kids. And the 3 older ones went with dad, or the 2 older ones went with dad to Texas to go camping, and they're all killed. I don't remember how, I don't remember why, but they were all killed. He had $1 million life insurance policy, and he listed all 5 of those kids as beneficiaries. So she calls us, how do I get that money? Well, those kids can't inherit. Though that financial institution's not gonna cut a check to minor kids. So we've gotta go to probate court and open up a guardianship over the estate, so that, and then once you get your orders, then you can open up the account that you can deposit that money to. By the way, then the court's gonna supervise your activities on that account until the kids all turn 18 years old. You're gonna have to pay an attorney to make each appearance, whatever kind of calendar that they set you up on, and they're gonna scrutinize every single transaction that you do on behalf of these kids. From the sound of it, that's not what her ex-husband intended. And if he had known any better, I'm sure he would have set it up differently. But that was a heartache for her, like losing her kids, and now you've got to go to court and try to figure all this out as well. So the ugly with estate planning, and common like misconceptions, misunderstandings, and mistakes that I've seen a lot of them already this week. It's been a crazy week. So this is maybe a surprise. But the way that you own property, like real property, for example, and any accounts that has a change of beneficiary on it, or not a change of beneficiary, a beneficiary designation will trump an estate plan. So if you own property, for example, as joint tenants, which has a right of survivorship to it, doesn't matter that your trust says or your will says my house is gonna go to my sister or to my kids. If it's joint tenancy with you and your brother, for example, you pass away, that house is going to your brother. Doesn't matter what's in your trust. So the deed in those situations on real property trumps an estate plan. Same with any asset that has a beneficiary designation on it. So think of life insurance, think of 401ks, IRAs, brokerage accounts, just about everything has stock options, has the ability to name a beneficiary. I'll give you a real ugly story on this one. Is that so when I was at this same family law place, it's crazy that these stories all came from there. When I got into this case, the divorce was already finalized. Apparently, it was a very contentious divorce. And in the divorce decree, so in the judgment, the life insurance policy was awarded to the husband, who was our client. When after the divorce was over, he got sick and he was in the hospital and executed a deathbed will or trust. I can't remember which one it was, and you're going to see why it doesn't matter. And in his will or trust, he states all of my assets to our adult sons. He passes away. He left his brother in charge as either the executor or as the trustee, I'm not sure. And he calls the life insurance saying, we'd like the life insurance policy, life insurance, my brother's passed away. Oh, okay, well, unfortunately, that's already been paid out. And as you can imagine, when he told us the story, he had to pick his jaw off the floor. who did it get paid out to? And I'm shocked that they actually disclosed this to him. It was his ex-wife. Because he never changed the beneficiary for him. And so even though he had an estate plan that said, this is to go to my kids, because he didn't change that form, those are the orders that the directive that those financial institutions follow. And their response to him was, if he didn't like her that much, it would have been, you would think it would have been important enough to him to change the beneficiary designation to make sure that it wouldn't have gone to her. But he never did that. So that money's gone. This week I had a similar situation with the house that was left. All the assets are left in the husband's name. He had a life insurance policy. It's a minimal policy, but the wife called. She hasn't been working for quite some time, and he is in a union and had been in this union for almost 30 years. So she calls like the life insurance policy because she assumed she's the beneficiary on it. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not the beneficiary on this policy. And so she thinks he never changed it from 28 years ago. They weren't married then. She believes it's probably in his mom's name. She doesn't know. Mom's gone. So now we're having to deal with that. She lost her husband, now she's got to figure out how to unwind that.
Oh.
Surprise number 2 is that a will goes through probate. There is no other place for a will to go other than probate. So I'm going to give you a really cheesy saying so that you'll remember it, is that if there is a will, there is a probate. Because there's only one person that can validate a will, that's a judge. And there's only one person that can approve of the distribution, is a judge as well. Because I hear that a lot, like, well, I got a will, so no big deal. But you know that it's going to go through probate, right? So we're still talking about the same time frame of 1 to 2 years and that 5%. The only difference between having a will and not having a will, does it make it go any shorter, like the process? No. Does it make it any cheaper? No. The only difference is that a will is telling the state that I don't want to use your plan and this is how I want my assets to be distributed. That's it. That's the only difference. So here's some estate planning mistakes. And I've seen most of them, again, in the last 7 days, which is crazy. So a document alone is not enough. So like I was explaining with that life insurance policy with the ex-husband, that alone is not enough. It needs to be in coordination with the rest of your assets. So when I meet with clients is that I have to take a look under the hood. You gotta give me the goods. I gotta know what goods we're working with here. So you gotta, by having, taking a look at all of your assets. What kind of assets do you own? Trust in estate plans not being updated regularly is a huge issue. So again, I was talking about the couple I met with earlier this week, literally dusting off their documents. And why is this a problem is because your assets change, the laws change, family dynamics change, people die, people move, whatever the situation is, and your plan doesn't have that reflected. So for example, like assets changing, this is a huge one. Like over the course of your lifetime, I mean, Dan, you and Melissa, you guys know, like how many homes do people own during their lifetime?
The average, there's
Yeah.
3 within the
3, yeah. And hopefully you have at least those assets where you're at real estate where they're supposed to be, and that your estate plan is still referencing the homes that you own. The couple their plan wasn't even that old, but there's properties that they've already sold on it. So if anybody else needed to pick up that estate plan and try to execute what they had, they didn't even know that they didn't own them anymore. And then if you think about I was reviewing another estate plan, they had to refinance their house. They decided to refinance it, I don't know, like 5 years ago or whatever, probably during COVID when the interest rates were super low. But what the lender is, so the lender told me you gotta take it out of your trust. So they take it out of their trust. Lender doesn't put it, or they didn't put it back in the trust after it closed, and they forgot about doing that. And if something had happened to this husband and wife, the kids would have had to deal with probate court to get it back into the trust. So it's that. Also think about in the last, like, I don't know, probably 12 years, all the banks that have closed down and been reacquired. So I was looking at my client's mother's trust. His mom died 1.5 years ago, and it's referencing banking institutions that are no longer around. So now it's like, do you know where your mom banked? No, we do not. So that sends them off on a wild goose chase. Missing elements. As I mentioned before, I see a lot of things that have pieces of things, not a whole comprehensive package. So it's making sure that you understand what is it that I need and how is it going to benefit me, and making sure that that is in your portfolio as well. Because what's missing, like for example, I was reviewing one that had no incapacity planning. So what happens if you slip and fell? Like this happened to one of my clients in her 30s. She slipped and fell, hit her head against the in the tub, and is incapacitated in a coma for a couple of weeks. Who's going to be able to take care of this stuff? I had a situation, it was a family law case too, where it was a botched gastric bypass surgery in Mexico, and her whole body went into sepsis, was on life support. Family had no idea what she had, and then trying to figure it out, they can't get any access, nobody's going to give them information because they have no legal documents saying they have a right to it. The only way to be able to do that is through conservatorship. So just things to think about as well. These are the actual elements here. Having a will or testament, or I mean your last will and testament is also with a trust, like people don't realize that, but those go hand in hand. Or that you just have a will. In some situations that is a good idea. Your incapacity planning, that's these 3 documents here. A kids protection plan if you've got minor kids. A wealth inventory, which we're going to talk about in a second. And this one is optional, it's asset protection trust as well, whatever your goals are. So lack of a schedule of assets. So I'm always floored when I'm looking at other attorneys' work, and I go, first thing I always do is I look to the schedule, because that's going to tell me what kind of assets there are, so I know what kind of provision should be in a trust. And it says all of our real property, all of our bank accounts, and all of our retirement accounts. What does that mean? Where are those things? Like, where are they located? It's like so vague. And if you think about like right now, so I had a woman I was talking to, her adult daughter passed away very suddenly, very tragically. And she has her laptop and her cell phone. They're sitting right next to each other on the counter. Like all the financial institutions, they don't send us statements in the mail anymore. Everything's sent electronically because they don't want to pay for the postage, they don't want to pay for the envelope, they don't want to have some pay people to do that. They say it's for environmental reasons, but I'm sure that may be a factor. But it's also cheaper just to hit, send it in an email. Well, if you don't disclose your password information, no one, she's literally staring at it, no one has it. And so when her daughter passed away, she brought in her friends, they flipped the house trying to find statements. They're all old, and they don't even know if those are what she has anymore. So as I mentioned, I was reviewing my client's mother's trust, is talking about Washington Mutual. Washington Mutual's not even around and hasn't been around for a while. So did your mom bank there before she died? I have no idea. So it's having this schedule. It's the family treasure map. So it's not only just when you pass away, but it's also if you become incapacitated and you nominate these people to do these very important things for you. Thank you so much, but I'm gonna do it like you have your arms cut off and you don't have all the information you need. I'm gonna create more work for you, which also hurts you, because if they're late with your payments, like the mortgage company doesn't care, the county doesn't care that they didn't receive their payment, your credit card, your car getting repossessed or whatever, they don't care. So you want to make sure that you're leaving, that you've got this schedule that's thorough, and so that you're leaving behind that treasure map, like you said, so you're not creating more work. This was an interesting story. This man that I met with, he's in Phoenix. He has this company. It's called, I forget the name of it now, but it's like an online vault for estate planning. And the reason why he got involved was because of his father-in-law. So when his father-in-law passed away, his wife, like cleaning out the house, found this tiny little safe deposit key. And so she takes it to the bank where her dad went and is like, oh, I'd like to open up box number whatever, never remember what it was. The bank's like, oh, that doesn't belong to us. That's not our box. She's like, that's so weird. He's only banked here for the last 45 years. And so he described it was an itch she could not scratch, so she just would not let it go. She went to every bank around town, not our key, not our key, not our key. She went clear across town, somewhere not even where her father was his regular haunts or whatever, all the way across town, found the bank with this key, and it had Apple stocks in it, old Apple stocks, Apple stocks.
Oh wow.
And But it's the same thing, like, if you don't disclose what you have, how is anybody supposed to find it so they can get it to the people that you intend to? Because what people don't realize is that financial institutions don't hold on to bank accounts forever. If they go inactive, they close down these accounts and they go to our wonderful Department of Unclaimed Property here in California. California, I should call, this was as of November 2021, it had over $12 billion. That's a billion dollars in it. Federal government has over $58 billion. You can also, as homework, go look yourself up on the California. I'm not joking. I found $100. I was like, in interest from 2 of my student loans, which have been paid off for a while. Some pharmacy refund. I don't even know what that's about. $75. I'm like, okay. And it had my address from over 12 years ago on there. I looked up my husband. It was an old utility bill from a house he lived at before we even dated. We were dating. So you'd be surprised at what you may find. But it's also like using my great aunt Sally. That IRA we didn't know about, that CD we didn't know about, that could all wind up there. So we want to, I don't know about you guys, I hope that it's not an assumption or putting words in your mouth, but I personally don't want the government to get any more of my money than they already have. So that's huge to me.
I've never heard of that. What
Yeah.
websites are those to find it?
What?
What websites do you go to?
So
find
you
it?
can Google Department of Unclaimed Property, California Department of Unclaimed Property, and you put your name in there, and use any of your maiden names. Go to every state that you've lived in and look there. My mom found, we used to live in Vermont a long time ago. She was a property tax refund of $1,200.
Wow.
She went to, my mom then took her internet prowess, which she does not have any, so it's surprising that she did it, to Wisconsin, where my aunt lives, and found a couple $100 for her. Like, it could be old paychecks that you didn't pick up. Remember when you get cable boxes and then you return them, you put a deposit down. So you just never picked up your deposit. It might be sitting there as well. So it could be fun. You might have a little gift that you're giving yourself. Your money. So absolutely.
Hey, worth a try.
Yeah, why not, right? And then we make it really easy to get it, which is shocking. My husband, because it was under a certain amount, I filled it out, submitted it. He's already gotten the check for it. That was less than 2 weeks ago. So, because mine is over $50, it's taking longer or whatever.
Yeah, 'cause I found something for my grandfather.
Oh.
It was like $100.
Nice.
You know,
Mhm.
and I never pursued it because I was like, well, I don't have any kind of information showing that I am his granddaughter.
Right. There's all these forms that they ask on that website as to what you need to provide for them to give you the check. So
Gotcha.
take a look at that for sure.
I sure will.
Another problem I see is not adequately planning for our kids that would potentially subject them to foster care. So that's where having these cards and the letters to the babysitters, so everybody's on the same page as to, and also sharing this information, whether it's with your guardians, whether it's with our successor trustees, your financial powers of attorney, it's actually telling them, by the way, I've nominated you, and by the way, this is where you find the documents, and by the way, here's also my attorney's information, who has a copy of everything too. So if something happens to me, they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. I have seen a lot of people wanting to keep this information secret that serves nobody, because those individuals then will not know what they're supposed to do as quickly as they're supposed to do it, right? So you certainly don't have to divulge everything, but just to let them know, like, hey, you're on deck if something happens to me, and this is where you can find the documents. Not enough successor trustees or backup beneficiaries. So this is a problem, or in the case I was telling you about before, is too many successor trustees. But what happens if you're, it's like in my family, I'm always nominated to be the successor trustee. What if something happens to me? Or what if I can't do it because, my kid's sick or whatever? It's making sure that you've got a plan in place that doesn't just rely on one person, because things happen. So I had the trust that I was talking to you guys about before with Washington Mutual listed in there. She nominated her brother, unbeknownst to her, that as soon as she passed away, her brother's wife passed away. he is not in the mind frame to be able to be successor or be trustee for her estate. So it's making sure you've got backup people to that as well on all of your roles, not just that one person, because things do happen. Also, what are the backup beneficiaries to your plan? 'Cause what happens if God, fingers, toes, everything crossed, something happens to one of your kids, where it happens to their share? What happens if their whole family was involved in an accident? So this is where my Black Crow conversations come in. We gotta have a backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan, because we don't want your hard-earned money to wind up in the court system. So it's making sure everything's got an avenue to go somewhere. If that's important to you, some people are very adamant, I don't care, I'm not here. It's okay, just so you understand how this all plays out though. So, I mentioned before having too many successor trustees, because I see that too with parents. They're like, I don't want my kids to be upset that they think I'm favoriting, the oldest. So I'm just gonna put all of them on there. And the example I was giving, I named 3 of them. I'm like, what was your parents' attorney thinking? Because none of them are getting along. They're all threatening to sue each other. The way that it's going, they're not going to have a relationship with one another ever. Once this is over, they're done with each other. And it's also torpedoing other family relationships who are siding with some of these siblings. My aunt asked me to review her trust, and she did the same thing. Why are you doing this? What if they don't agree? There's no plan in place as to who's the tiebreaker vote. Maybe you bring somebody in. So it's thinking of these things as well, because the alternative is you got to go to court and you got to nominate someone to be the tiebreaker vote, or the judge to make that decision. Think again, that judge, 4 judges sitting in the county with thousands of cases. You're gonna rely on a complete stranger who spent 30 seconds reviewing your case, hearing about it for probably the first time there in court, making a decision that could affect things forever. So just think about those kinds of things. So again, it's going back to what is an estate plan, and making sure that you've got the right tools in place to accomplish your goals, so whatever they may be, that are going to support you both in your incapacity if you become incapacitated, or it is a guarantee that we will die. I just don't know when. That's the only thing. I can guarantee taxes. Someone's gonna have to pay taxes, and somebody's gonna die, and that's about all I can say, but I just don't know when or how much. That's the only thing I can't guarantee.
Not until 93 though.
What?
Not until I'm 93.
Yes, exactly. So here's just a review of the important lessons here, is that a will goes through probate. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When funded properly, so that's again that your assets are in coordination with the trust plan, it avoids court. So another real life example of why that's so critically important, and that what most attorneys do is they hand over the binder to their clients, and the very, very back is funding instructions. And most people don't even know they're there, and they have been given 0 instructions or a meeting as to what they're supposed to do after that. And so my client's parents had a trust, and he said, her stepdad said, don't worry, I took care of everything. I took care of everything, you don't have nothing to worry about. She's like, okay. Her mom dies, and then he dies shortly thereafter. And they had their second biggest asset were their retirement accounts. He did not change the beneficiary designations on those retirement accounts. So everything was left to the mom, who's already gone. So she had to go to court, and it's a shortened process than probate. It's called the headstead petition, and saying, hey, my parents had a trust. It says in the trust all their assets are supposed to be distributed in a trust, so please, judge, can we have a directed order for you to transfer this asset into the name of the trust? Well, there's always a well. Her sister is one of those sisters, found that as an opportunity, or tried to find that as an opportunity to contest the trust, and it cost my client $40,000 in attorney's fees, and almost a relationship with her sister. She wound up forgiving her sister, but that's not always the case either. So if her dad, literally, it's a couple page document, the change of beneficiary forms, if you remember filling those out when you get new employment, they're not long, but he never did it. And so $40,000, that's crazy to me. So a review of your assets has to be a part of the estate planning conversation. There's no way to do it, and I don't know how attorneys do it. I think that's not practice, that's just me. And looking at titles and beneficiary designations. And then if you have minor children, it's that conversation also that short-term guardians are just as equally important as long-term guardians, because the whole purpose of short-term guardians is to avoid foster care. So do I need a lawyer to do any of these things? Well, I'm gonna give you the most lawyerly response is that it depends. So if, like on those sheets that you guys had, if the kids protection plan really spoke to you, I have some of those tools that are online, they're absolutely free, so I can give those to you if you want. But if there's anything else on there, like, we didn't talk about estate taxes. California doesn't have any, but, which is shocking every time I say it, the federal government does. It's really, really high right now. For a married couple, it's $25 million. So generally speaking, most people don't have an estate tax issue. But if there's any other boxes on that worksheet that are a concern of yours, it would certainly benefit from working with an estate planning attorney. Because it's not about you, it's about the people that we love, and they're gonna be the ones to know whether or not you lived up to the promises. I took care of it. So I really do believe what I do is differently. I have a very heart-centered, client-focused practice, and I like it that way. It makes what I do much more meaningful. I do not bill by the hour. Has anybody worked with an attorney that bills by the hour? Yeah. It's a terrible way to live as an attorney, by the way. And I know that the clients have a heart attack every time they get that invoice in the mail. It's like, now how much do I owe? Because they're shocked that 5-second conversation turned into a $90 bill, that email, that the attorney wrote back, thanks, got it, got charged for that too. Every postage stamp, every piece of paper, you're charged for that. I don't practice that way. Everything is fully disclosed, and I don't live and die by billable hour. What I ensure is to make that your assets are going to be owned the right way in coordination with whatever estate plan that you have. And that I spend a lot of time with my clients so that I understand those family dynamics, and that we've got a plan that's working around that, working with it as well. And that I also, which is one of my favorite things about what I do, is I capture non-liquid assets. What is that? Good thing you asked. At the end of all of my estate planning, once we have everything signed, executed, and funded, it's completely optional. I do what's called a legacy interview. I send you a bunch of questions, you pick about 10, and we talk about your family history. Where did you grow up? What are values that are important to you? If you have kids, like what are things that are important that your kids continue doing, like with education and growing up with money or whatever it may be? What are some of the unique things about you and your life experiences that you want to pass along? Because I've experienced losing voicemails from family members. It was my uncle specifically. He died of pancreatic cancer, and I lost his voicemail from him when my oldest was born in a neonatal. And it was on Christmas Eve, and he wound up dying like literally 5 months later, and none of us could have foreseen that. And somehow through updating my phone, I've lost that voicemail. So it's you telling the stories in only a way that you can, because as of right now, we do not have the technology that can replicate you telling the stories that mean the most. And so minimally, I meet with all my clients every 3 years to go over their estate plan, and we can add on to another edition of that legacy library. So when it is your time to go, the idea is you're gonna have this huge library of videos that are gonna mean so much to your family and loved ones, because none of that can be recreated and none of that can be repurchased. Money is lost and re-earned every single day, but the sound of your voice telling these things cannot. So I do that, and it's really important, and it's really, really fun for me. It might not sound like it's fun, but I learned so much about my clients, and that they share with me, and I know, and because I hear about it for the first time, I always ask all these other follow-up questions so we get all those details.